So yes, I'm going to be talking about the technological singularity. Thanks for coming, everybody. Appreciate you getting up early on this nice, gloomy Saturday morning. It's a great place to have a conference. But right now, like what I was discussing before, we are in a period of rapid accelerating change. There are technologies all around us, and it has historically created major transformation. That's an example of a transformation. This is like a bomb going off. That wouldn't have happened if the idea didn't pop out of somebody's mind, okay? So there are some examples of technology all around us. Where did you wake up this morning? Did you wake up in a bed? Did you wake up next to a clock? Or did you have four walls around you? 10 to 12, 15,000 years ago, we were running around with spears trying to catch animals to survive. Now we're going to work and we're sitting at computers. Okay? So a lot of our job today is actually interfacing with technology in order to survive. So machine intelligence does pose a number of complicated problems that I think are ripe for analysis now. And now, rather than later, because it's very important because intelligence is powerful. Okay? So the mobile phones that you have in your hand didn't grow on a tree. Neither did they grow underground. They didn't fall from the sky. God didn't give them to us. They actually came out of ideas that sprung out of the human mind. So, this is the first time I've done a video presentation for it. It's going to be a bit shocking. So I suggest that we do have a clearer understanding of the likelihood of technology to benefit us or to harm us. So in order to understand the singularity, we need to think about elements of the singularity clearly. And so instead of me just sitting here trying to tell you what I believe is important, I want you to be able to make up your own minds about the feasibility of the technology, whether it's possible, or whether we're all just loonies feeding you like snake oil. So I'm going to try to present to you ways to think about technological change, especially artificial intelligence, because I believe that artificial intelligence is going to be the most powerful, or intelligence in general is the most powerful force that we know in the universe. So rapid change can happen quickly. We've got an example here. This is just an animation of animals in body parts, body designs that exploded. In the Cambrian explosion, this is like 4 billion years ago, there were so many new body designs just crop up out of nowhere in relatively no time at all, in geological time frames. So we're not talking about like 5 minutes here. They took like millions of years to develop different body plans, okay? But those body plans that suddenly just appeared on Earth within a couple of billion years, a few million years, or tens of million years, I'm not really sure, but it was a very short period of time compared to the billions of years that the universe has been around and the 4.3 billion years that the Earth has been around for. And so we can see these body designs, I think there are about 18, right? We can see them in modern life forms. Here we can see an elephant, which is based on a very early body design that came about in the Cambrian explosion. Okay, so the point is that change can happen very quickly relative to other change happening at the time. So one of the other interesting things about evolution of the species is that certain forms of evolution happened in many different branches of the phylogenetic tree. So that means that many branches of evolution converge on interesting body designs, like the wings of a bat, okay, and the wings of a bird. They're very functionally similar, okay, but when they diverged early on in evolution, they didn't have wings, but both of them developed wings, okay. So the idea here is that evolution seems to converge on powerful body plans and powerful ideas. And another one is intelligence. And we believe that scientists believe that they found general intelligence in other forms of life that are so far divergent from human life, like corvids, parrots. They have a certain form of general intelligence. Remember before, I talked about how general intelligence can work across different, like you can have intelligence across different areas that cross-pollinate each other. So you can have intelligence in like socialization, and you can have intelligence in a subcategory, maybe that might be the ability to influence people and the ability to speak. These all affect each other, but then you might have a form of intelligence that is really good for you to be able to kick a ball. And from that, it will make it easier to learn how to, sorry? I've got 25 minutes left. It'll be easier to learn how to kick a football rather than a soccer ball, although they're completely different objects. And then you might be able to learn how to play billiards better, because you understand how balls roll, okay? So, intelligence has evolved in primates, and they've evolved in other species as well. So from this point, what I'd like to say is evolution has found intelligence important. And another interesting fact is that evolution has found intelligence so important that humans, I guess maybe 10,000 years ago, just as agriculture started, we have record saying that up to 40% of women died during pregnancy, okay, during giving birth. And that's a shocking thing, but it's interesting that evolution found it so important to have intelligence, that it made intelligence so important in humans that it was willing to allow for women to die. In 40%, up to 40% of women to die in childbirth. That's a pretty high number. And so the accelerating progress in technology has been a central feature of the past. Not only this century, I've put this century because we've been around to witness some of the amazing technological changes. So everybody knows where this thing has come from? Has anybody recognised where it's come from? Okay, yes, I see a couple of hands. So it's, yep, that's right. It's from the 2001 Space Odyssey, you're correct. I said Odyssey, sorry, I meant Odyssey. So it's a very powerful scene, and it shows how earlier primates that maybe were descended from us learned to pick up objects and use them as tools. And there's an interesting transition coming up, you'll see. If you haven't seen the movie 2001 Space Odyssey, I recommend you see it. It's a great movie. So here's a quote from Vernor Vinge, who actually coined the term technological singularity. He thinks that we're on the edge of a rise of change comparable to the rise of human life on Earth. Okay? So another reason why I've sort of talked about the Cambrian explosion and monkeys picking up objects and starting to use them, and animals using technology to achieve amazing things is because we may be seeing that again with our own technology. We may be seeing such explosive change that even by today's standards, it may actually really surprise us. Within our lifetimes alone, what sorts of technologies have we seen just come out of nowhere, it seems? It didn't come out of nowhere, actually. It came out of minds, this technology. We've seen the internet, we've seen mobile phones, we've seen all sorts of new forms of media come out there. We've seen search engines get better and better, social networking sites that are putting people together. Now we understand, now we can see what's going on the other side of the world almost in real time. So Charles Darwin said, it's not the strongest of the species that survive, but the ones most responsive to change. Okay? Now, Charles Darwin, I'm sure most of you know, was one of the first people to come up with the idea of evolution. Okay? Now, why does that matter? Us as humans didn't rise from the animal kingdom because we were strong. We don't have massive muscles. At least I don't. I know a couple of people in the audience there have really big muscles, and they like to flex them very often in front of the mirror. So The idea is that we didn't rise to prominence as a human species by being strong, by flying. We weren't great flyers. In fact, we didn't fly. We weren't really good biters. We've got very big mouths. We don't have massive teeth. We don't have claws. We can't dig very well. Okay? But what we can do is innovate and invent. So here's the transition I was talking about. He just threw a tool up into the air and suddenly it becomes a spaceship. Well, that's awesome. So we have to ask ourselves, in the near-term horizon, what is going to change with technology? Is it, or have we just seen all the change, technological change that we can expect within the next 20 years? I doubt it. Technology is moving ahead like gangbusters. There's every reason to believe that there are some very powerful technologies that are almost at a tipping point, ready to make a big change in the near future. So what do I mean by a tipping point? Okay, so if we leverage something up until a certain point, we only need to push it a little bit further, and gravity takes it down the rest of the way. So it'll become easier and easier to do certain technologies once the invention of preparatory or foundational technologies allow us. So it's kind of like grabbing all the low-hanging fruit from the lower parts of the branches of the tree and then building a ladder, a technology, to be able to easily pick fruit higher up the tree. So I think that we can expect to see technological change. I think it's fair enough to assume that there's some likelihood of powerful technological change in the future. And so, but technology just doesn't happen by itself. It's not going to actually create itself yet. Although we do have robots that are particularly good at science. There's a robot called Adam. That's my name. I'm not a robot, but there is actually a robot called Adam that does its own science, that has discovered it's discovered how, I think, yeast grows in a certain environment. And then also, there's another program called Eureka, another bit of artificial intelligence there. It's amazing because what it does is it can watch chaotic pendulum swing. You know the pendulums that have more than, it's got one straight bit and then a hinge so that there's another bit which is swinging underneath that. So it's got kind of like a double jointed pendulum. Eureka watched the pendulum swing and from that derived the mathematics to an approximation of Newton's laws of gravity. As far as my interpretation. I'm not a scientist in that area, so I'm sure people might tell me that I've sort of explain that as well. Who knows? Okay. So every great advancement in science has issues of an audacity of imagination. So what we really need is courage and imagination to be able to develop ways that we can navigate the technological terrain in the future so as to come to beneficial ends. We don't want a society tomorrow where technology doesn't need us, and therefore we are discarded. We may not have employment or means to survive. Okay. So I just think it's amazing how far we've come within my lifetime. What the sort of technological change that I've seen. The computers started to get popular when I was a kid. I had an Apple IIc on my desk and I learned how to program BASIC then, which was a pretty good leg up into the IT industry that I pick up later in my life. So we can see that there's been massive change. So is superintelligence plausible? And I asked this question before, but I really do want you to make up your own minds about that. I don't think I can convince you. I think you need to be able to convince yourselves. But there are ways to think about superintelligence. And what do I mean by superintelligence? Well, an intelligence that is greater than the standard of human intelligence we see. So there are prominent neuroscientists and CTOs of companies who have suggested that there's something like a technological singularity on the horizon. Here's two of them. Is there any neuroscientists in the audience? No? Anybody studying neuroscience as a secondary subject? Okay, Ben, yes, we have one. Okay, so maybe you can back this up later. But so Terry Sinowski, who also spoke at the Singularity Summit in America and came to Australia and spoke as well, said that reverse engineering the brain is within reach. So we are developing the technology now to be able to scan and understand how the brain works on a finer and finer level. We're developing more and more robust technology to be able to understand what's really going on biologically in our head. And if we understand what's going on in our head, enough to understand what the underpinnings of intelligence is, then it becomes largely an engineering problem. It's not a mythical problem. It's not a problem that's so far removed from where we are today. It's not in a different magisterium. I argue that our intelligence is solely based on physical processes in human brain. It's all physics. And so, yeah, CTO, Justin Ratner, the Chief Technology Officer of Intel, is saying that we'll make steady progress towards Ray Kurzweil, who you might have heard of, his version of Singularity. So, but I'll echo this again, there's a tension between creativity and skepticism. This is quote by Carl Sagan that produced the stunning and unexpected findings of science. We need to be skeptical about these concepts. I mean, we should just blindly accept that AI one day will just suddenly spring out of nowhere and change the way we understand, or make a big change. We need to look at this carefully, and in understanding the likely roadmaps to artificial general intelligence may help us bias the likelihood of making it safe. Okay. So by accelerators here, I mean what occurrences, what sorts of developments in the future will likely make the singularity closer? What will speed up the coming of something like the singularity? More hardware, okay? So more computing power allow us to do more and more calculations per second. That will enable us to do amazing things. So the faster and faster we run, even our current algorithms, the more likely we're going to get there further. But that's not the only thing, okay? So better algorithm design. We don't know. Maybe we have the wrong algorithms right now, and just saying speed won't cut it. Maybe we need to design better algorithms to be able to do this, and maybe more efficient algorithms. Because maybe if we depend on Moore's law forever, perhaps it'll take ages to catch up. So massive data sets, we're collecting massive data sets. We've got a massive telescope array happening in Australia, the square kilometre array. That's going to create so much data that we have to funnel some of it out during the process of capturing it. So we're going to be using machine intelligence to understand that data set. So there's processes in psychology and neuroscience that feed into this. Accelerated science, there's economic incentives. Now, I mean, the first person to come up with like a reasonably intelligent, maybe 10-year-old style general intelligence is likely going to be able to make a lot of money, okay? And, but there are also accelerators. There's things that could happen that will cause the singularity either to never happen or just happen maybe very far into the future. Society collapsing could be one of those, okay? So there may be an end to Moore's law. Now remember, Moore's law, if I haven't already discussed it, is the accelerating progress in technology in general. It's often used to, it's often colloquially used to mean technology in general, but Moore's law is literally the amount of transistors you can fit onto a CPU, doubling every 18 months to 2 years, okay? There could be a complete depletion of low-hanging fruit, and we can't develop a high enough ladder to get to the next stage. I can't see any evidence of that across the board. There may be some areas where it's very hard to get past, but like across the board, there's always opportunities to make technological change. Societal collapse. If global warming stops our progression because we lose the framework in which we have, like we're scaffolding thousands and millions of scientists working on these problems, if that suddenly goes away, then it's going to be very hard to make progress in science and technology. If there's a nuclear exchange, if there's a solar flare, there may be a disinclination. Maybe we'll decide, oh, these technologies, this is so dangerous, we shouldn't be doing. We shouldn't be actually developing these technologies. That's a possibility. We can't be 100, if it's not likely that we can develop the technology to have a safe future with the technology, then why would we continue developing it? Well, maybe if we were all one in mind and spirit, perhaps, but there will always be underground movements and competitive advances by different countries or different organisations who maybe have like skunk works operations going on that might actually develop technologies in secret. So even if we decide as a culture to stop this from happening, there can be dissent. So how long can we expect, how long before the singularity? How long is the likely estimates? Well, a lot of people say a lot of different things, and I think it's very hard to predict. But we can make predictions. Just because we don't know for sure, we can make estimates based on what we know. A lot of experts say that it could be in 100 years. Just putting that within this century. Okay. So, in terms of how to think about the singularity, there's 3 concepts that I'm going to introduce you to. One is accelerating returns. The other is the idea of an event horizon. And the third is the idea of an intelligence explosion. We'll start with accelerating return because that's Kurzweil concept, and a lot of people know that. So accelerating returns is very strongly coupled to the idea of Moore's law and technological progress over time. Okay, but the progress of technology that uses the previous progress of technology gets faster and faster. So technology pods on technology, it creates faster and faster developments of technology. And we wouldn't be able to move as fast ahead in developing faster and faster computers if we didn't first develop early forms of computation, and it's impossible. So having more computer power does help, as I mentioned as one of the points in the accelerators. What time is it? 10:40. It's 10:40 now. Okay, well I'm actually supposed to be starting my talk now, so I've got plenty of time. Alright, so the idea that strong AI may be able to brute force to superintelligence just by having enough computational power. We could use evolutionary computing to be able to let the design find itself, let the design find its own way to superintelligence, and that's possible where existence proofs of that happening. Except we can guide that evolution. Human evolution, the evolution by natural selection, has come about through eons of slow progress. So one mutation is like a nearest name search, and it may not even be favourable. And so the environment sort of selects the right sorts of mutations that are favourable. And we can thank natural selection for getting us to where we are now, but it's slow, it's cumbersome, and it's often dangerous, because 99.999% of species that have actually evolved into, I guess, what we call a certain species are extinct. Okay, so technology does enable further innovation, which enables advances in technology. I'll echo. So I said that before, but it's not required. Even if society does stagnate in technological development, it may not actually cause a singularity not to happen. So it's not a complete, let's just say we don't develop faster and faster computers. We could have scientists sitting somewhere who suddenly, or AI scientists who suddenly come up with the right algorithm to bootstrap superintelligence, okay? If that happens, then, well, it doesn't require that there was accelerating progress beforehand. So when I say the singularity, what I really mean is the intelligence explosion. Although accelerating change does increase, to my mind, the likelihood of a singularity, it's not actually the singularity to me. Okay? I'll explain why later. So, yeah, the idea that accelerating change should be thought of as a separate component, as a separate idea that may help increase the likelihood of a singularity. We'll say that while waiting for the next transition. The next concept is the event horizon concept. How will we know what an intelligence that is both far greater than our own and maybe architecturally very different from our own? How do we know what we think? It's a very hard problem. What can we do? I mean, like, we're at this stage. What would Vernor Vinge says, who coined the term technological singularity, who I mentioned before, great sci-fi, by the way, he said that what would a goldfish know of Mozart? Can a goldfish appreciate the relevance of Mozart? Maybe. I don't know, I'm not a goldfish. Okay, so the idea is, if you have superintelligence, how do you know what it's going to think? So we see this event horizon metaphor, the singularity metaphor in maths and in physics. It first started in maths, okay, and physics borrowed the concept from maths to say, okay, well, it's very hard to see beyond an event horizon. Now, does everybody understand that an event horizon is that part of a black hole where light is sucked in so fast that you can't actually see the light? Right? You can't see what's going inside the black hole. Okay? And so we use this metaphor to try to help people understand that it may be very difficult, not impossible, but difficult to make predictions about what an AI may think if it gets to a certain level of intelligence that is far beyond our own. Okay? It's difficult to make these predictions. There's another metaphor which I'll bring in, and that's the Hawking radiation idea, where particles that are cohered, that are strongly coupled. What's the word? I keep forgetting. So there's particles that are entangled in the universe, and an interaction with one particle can affect the state of the other particle. Okay? So if one of these particles escapes into the black hole, by watching the particle that's entangled with, we may be able to make predictions about what's going on in the black hole. Okay? That's a metaphor to understand, to help us think about, well, what can we do to make predictions about our vastly superintelligence? I don't think the game is lost. I think we can make predictions. That's my intuition. There's been a number of others who have suggested this. Nick Bostrom and Steve Obermundo believe that if a superintelligence gets to a state where it can self-reason, then it may be able to make, we may be able to make predictions about its behaviour. We might be able to make predictions saying it will try and protect its resources. It might try and be able to self-improve. It may want to optimize itself. There are a number of points that we can make predictions about. But what this is saying is we can assume, as long as the artificial intelligence doesn't have the goal of trying to make itself more stupid or kill itself, then it will try to make itself more intelligent and more able to survive in the universe. So the third concept is the intelligence explosion. And this is what I really mean when I mean the technological singularity. So this is an awesome concept. It's very tight in its definition. I think we need to be careful about how we define things. So I'd suggest after this conference you go back and do a little reading on the intelligence explosion. So it's a feedback loop of minds being able to create smarter minds. That's the simplest expression that I can give us. But if there exists a mind that can make a smarter mind, if we can make smarter minds, then that smarter mind with its extra intelligence may be able to make an even smarter mind. Okay, so this is a feedback process. Collaborators repeat, it happens over and over again. And this may result in a very intelligent entity, okay? Because it could happen very quickly. I guess one thing to note here in trying to make predictions about how fast a singularity might happen, or the rapid change that may result in a singularity, is that we don't currently understand how our brains work. We don't currently understand how our minds work. And AI may be able to, like, this is a black box, okay? And it's also constrained in its resources. And AI may be able to understand, have a blueprint of how it works. So if the AI understands completely how it works, it may be able to optimize areas of its operation. So if you have a code base for a compiler, you may be able to look at that compiler and understand what's going on and make it more efficient. You may be able to optimize that compiler so it makes it even better. You can compile even better programs. Or drivers, software drivers. Sometimes you get driver updates for your software, right? You've got peripheral devices and you can upgrade the drivers because that helps the GPU work better and helps graphics run faster and stops problems from happening. This is sort of similar in concept, that an AI, if it's got a code base, will be able to understand itself and then will be able to recursively correct itself, and with the more intelligence and optimization and computing power that it gets in doing so, would be able to think of better ways to do that in smaller periods of time. That's a very powerful concept. Yeah. And I think that's the core thesis behind the technological singularity. So in retrospect, we don't need accelerating progress to have a singularity. The singularity doesn't include the idea that you can't predict what's happening beyond the singularity. Have we almost finished in time? Okay, so we'll just start to wrap up. What time is it? Okay, so I've got 15 minutes. Well, I'll stop at 11.
So we started like much earlier.
Yeah, okay.
So you've actually gone more than the amount of time.
Yeah. I factored that in. Okay, so anyway, I'll wrap up now. So the idea is that if we have artificial intelligence that can self-improve, we should really be thinking about how we create that artificial intelligence in advance, and not just assume that everything will be okay. We need to guide this process carefully, and we need the greatest minds to work on this problem. We need more minds. And we need China to help solve this problem. There's so many smart people in China. And when you think of like the sort of resources that are going into developing better forms of lipstick, or the sort of finance that's going into sort of working out how to advertise that cologne, so more men will buy it. The amount of finance or research money going into these sorts of concepts is hardly anything at all. So anyway, I'll just leave it there. I thank you very much for your time, and I'll hand you over to the next speaker. We have James. James, you want to come up and plug in and get ready? So we have you next. Right, is there any questions while James is there? Do we have any queries, questions? Hugo.
What's coming up, like next event? Where, when?
What's coming up? Well, I've got a conference in Australia that's happening in the 30th of November to the 1st of December, and it's titled Science, Technology and the Future. And it's got some amazing speakers. We've got Peter Doherty, Professor Peter Doherty, who's a Nobel laureate, coming and talking at the conference. We have Marcus Hutter, who came up with a mathematical proof for universal artificial intelligence that unfortunately won't run on our current hardware because it's so green. The algorithm is so green. And yeah, I encourage you all to come along. So that's on the 30th of December to the 1st of December. And the URL for that is scifuture.org. That's SCI future.org.